Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I don't know what part of the world you're listening from, but I can tell you this much. It's 2 o'clock Central Standard Time in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and did the rest of you get woken up at like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m.? Oh, my God, this rainstorm was ridiculous this morning. My kids got woken up. I got woken up. I have a feeling that I got beat on the ugly stick today because I'm like, yeah, I'm not as happy as I should be. I'm very, very excited about today's guest, but I'm a little cranky, so I guess you guys will just have to deal with me for today. I want to do a couple of quick reminders before I get Jeff Stearns on the line and we start talking about mix match along with all sorts of other things. Just a quick reminder about the rest of the shows this week. Tomorrow, we're going to be having I am amazingly in awe of this person. Her name is Jennifer Rowe. She's going to be coming on the show tomorrow at 12 o'clock Central Standard Time. We're going to be talking about her plight. She had started having an obesity problem when she was actually first, it was right before she got pregnant, then she ended up getting gestational diabetes when she was pregnant and ended up gaining just an exorbitant amount of weight. And we're going to be talking to her journey basically from going about 255 or 260 pounds. Not only did she lose over 100 pounds, but how she used running and health and nutrition and all sorts of other things to be able to establish a new life for herself. So it's really super exciting. And she's done a ton of different things. So very excited to be featuring her tomorrow. And then, of course, on Friday, July 14th we haven't confirmed the time, so don't quote. It's either 12 or 1 o'clock, and please check the show page or my Facebook personal page. The one and only local musician himself, Bad Boy. Did I just say that? Yes, I did. U.S. Project frontman, along with about 50 other bands. Obviously, Mr. Scotty Behrens himself is finally coming on the show, so I'm super excited to be hosting him. But without further ado, since Jeff has been so patient, let's get him on the line and start talking about his projects, his independent film, and I'm so excited to talk about this topic. So let's get him on the line and get going. Hi, Jeff.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Cindy. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Now that I've researched you and I have a whole lot of knowledge about you, I'm intimidated. I'm not going to lie. You are a really big deal. Like, you're a super huge deal. I'm like, oh, my God, he's mega talented. That's awesome. Are you aware of that? You're like a mega talent.
I try to stay humble.
True.
No, I've been making films for about 20 years now. So, yeah, it's you start to roll across many circles, I think, when you put in that much time, for sure.
You bet, Doc. You bet. And before I forget to ask, before I forget to tell everybody, the main way that Jeff and I actually met was I was invited to act as media at one of the film festivals, which most people know I already do. And it just so happened that Newport Beach Film Festival is where he was showing, and I didn't get an opportunity to make it there. So I extended the invitation to a number of different filmmakers to come on my show and talk about their film. And I'm so glad that I did, because I really think the topic of this one is particularly poignant. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about a couple of different things, because you're not just a filmmaker of one thing. You're a man of many means, to be honest with you. So I want to start off with just the basic you, which is I think it is so awesome that you're Japanese and European. That's like the coolest mix ever in the entire world, because I've seen your picture. I know what you look like. So with being Japanese and being European, from a customary standpoint, meaning talk to me a little bit about the culture, and that's got to be so cool in so many different ways because you have so many different traditions that are different than most of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a main focus of my work, actually, is identity. And, I think a lot of our identity is formed by, obviously, people, place, and time, and our backgrounds. And so being blended and mixed, that has definitely influenced my work. Basically, I grew up in Canada in a sort of a smaller city called Kelowna, British Columbia, and it was predominantly a pretty white place, and so growing up even a little bit kind of as a minority, I struggled. I had some challenges, and that I actually kind of put in a film called What Are You Anyways? That's kind of a quintessential question that mixed race people get, as they go through life, is people are very curious because you look, different. You look like the other, I guess. And so people are very kind of curious to sort of find out where are you from, which is sometimes the wrong question because I'm from Canada, you know what I mean? But
right.
I think the curiosity stems really just because they're interested in your background, and so a lot of the work I have sort of worked with on my film projects has a lot to do with multiracial identity, and a lot of it looks at my own kind of experiences I've had growing up being mixed.
Well, and what I found interesting was, to those of you that don't know, it wasn't so long ago actually that I saw that you were quoted, you had done an interview with a number of other filmmakers talking about Hollywood in terms of how they view and how they deal with, and I'd like you to touch on that a little bit, some of the points that you had talked about in terms of filmmaking in Hollywood and their acceptance and dealing with and working with different ethnicities. Do you still believe it, and I hear this a lot from female filmmakers in particular, that there is a bias still that exists, even though it's not outwardly expressed, let's say, when it comes to filmmakers, filmmaking, and Hollywood? Make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a very heated topic, and obviously you see a lot of that popping up on your social media feeds, right? There's a lot of awareness, and a lot of it it has to do with representation, right? We want to see the American and North American, cultural aspects reflected in our media, and so a lot of that stems from, wanting to make sure that there's enough representation in our films and on TV, et cetera. Being mixed, myself, it's sometimes a slippery slope because, I can sometimes pass for different things and many different things, so it's a little bit tricky for me in that respect because, I still have a Caucasian side, right, even though I am part Japanese as well. So, when asked to talk about a lot of this sort of racial diversity stuff in Hollywood, it's a little bit different approach for me, because you look at actors like Keanu Reeves, Olivia Munn, a lot of these actors in Hollywood are mixed, right? But they're playing roles, where their race isn't quite forefront, right? They're just Keanu Reeves is Keanu Reeves, right? But he is still a mixed race actor. But he's not seen as an Asian actor, right? Which is sometimes tricky because people who are mixed, we can't really kind of straddle that line of being, why is he not an Asian actor, right? He's getting lead roles, but he is still mixed Asian. So it's sometimes a little tricky. Obviously you're dealing with, complexities there, obviously. But I think in the long term, we will start to see a lot more of this. There's a lot more, decision makers. There's a lot more directors and producers who have, diverse backgrounds. And, it's really just a matter of kind of capturing that within our films and capturing that mosaic of what is North America in our films. And that's going to happen, and it's happening, and it's always a slow burn. It'll take a while to get there, obviously, but, people are talking about it. There's that Oscar so white thing that came up, which is, and now the Academy's, I think included another 200 ethnically diverse people to the Academy, so they're making steps, and I think it'll happen, but I think in reality, it's going to be what it's going to be, over time, and we'll obviously have more diversity on film as time goes on. I think it's something where, a lot of people who are coming up and, are being directors and producers who obviously identify as Asian or Black, are going to start casting those roles, right, as just as just a normality, right? It won't really be a big deal. It won't be. Well, it doesn't have to be an African American film. It could just exist as that. And I think we're getting there, But it's always, people want to fight for equality, obviously, and you're seeing that now with the Daniel Day Kim thing with Hawaii Five-0, not getting paid the same as their white counterparts, right? And so that's raising a bit of a profile there too, and I think that's important, that people are talking about this stuff.
I agree with you 100%. Actually, there's a piggyback question to that, which is, because obviously you do, along with a lot of the people that I speak to, deal specifically in independent films. So obviously it's very much unlike the Hollywood movies where they get backing from the studio and, of course, more the A-list celebrities, that sort of stuff. What is your take? I'm just curious if you have any impressions or what your thoughts are in terms of, do you think Hollywood is becoming very accepting and embracing and attempting to, in some small way, maybe assist the independent film community, or are they kind of still like, we're the big dog, we're the big people, we're the ones that make the money? Do you know what I'm trying to say? I think there might be a way for both of you to live symbiotically and support one another. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and I've encountered that. Starting out 20 years ago making films is a lot different experience than now, right? Obviously, the technology is getting better. Anyone can go out and make a film. They can buy a prosumer grade camera, go make a film. It's really simple. What I'm finding now is that there's a lot of content out there and a lot of content producers. People are making films, and that's a good thing, right? A lot of times people are making films with no budget, and that's sort of what independent filmmaking is like. And I think a lot of times people like to live in that independent world because there are no rules, right? You're not kind of bound by a studio system. Obviously, there's always crossover, and sometimes these smaller films kind of find a bigger audience through some of the studio sort of system. But at the same time, some of the studios are realizing that, yeah, they can invest $1 million and make back, if a film really hits big, they can make $20-30 million, right? So that's a pretty good investment when you think about it. So there is kind of a bit of a shift for some studios to start thinking in that way, realizing, hey, if we make a $150 million blockbuster, but then we make 150 films for $1 million, what's going to generate more revenue? And I think when you're seeing a lot of content sites and things like Netflix or Amazon or Google, they're needing content, right? So what's the best way to make content? Well, let's just make a bunch of content and hopefully we can make some good stuff. And a lot of the times the independent stuff, people find it refreshing because it's just outside that studio model. You're not dealing with the same sort of stories, the same kind of big action blockbusters, but you're actually dealing with stories that are quite close to home. And I think that's why there's a bit more flexibility there for minority filmmakers to be able to tell those stories. And you're seeing that a lot more, like the Big Sick, right? Like that's a story that obviously is touching on a lot of those themes, which is getting great reviews right now. So.
You betcha, definitely. Well, thank you for covering, because oftentimes I think that people don't really, when you talk about movies and things like that, unless you're kind of more directly involved in the producer, director side of things, or writers and such, you don't really get that. And so a lot of my listeners are always very curious about that. So I note that you have this, I love this quotation that you have, which is animation is meditation. So if you would speak on that just a little bit, I love that analog. I think that's awesome. Tell me in what ways that animation has served to be not just something that's personally rewarding for you, but some of your more professional awards or work that you've done that you've been completely just taken aback by. You know how we all do great work and then we're like, oh my God, there's certain projects in particular. So just tell me a bit about how animation has shaped that and made that sort of your meditation or your mantra, or talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I think like most kids growing up in the 80s, my holy church really for me was watching Saturday morning cartoons. Like I woke up early on Saturday, got my bowl of cereal, and just binge watched cartoons for like 5 hours because that was the only time you got to watch cartoons, and that really had a lasting effect on me. And so when I got older and I started to draw a lot more and I got really into illustration, I decided I wanted to become an animator. And that's kind of one of those weird questions where it's like, well, how do I become an animator, right? Like, is that just something you go to school for? At the time, when sort of researching, it wasn't quite a thing, right? Like, as I got older, I realized there are animation schools. So what was great is that I went to one here in Vancouver. I have a degree in actual film animation. And so I came out of school basically deciding I was going to do independent animation work, which really just meant that I was going to make my own animated films and have my own studio and basically kind of just do work for clients, but also create my own animated films. So luckily, that's where I started, and I created quite a few short animated films. And one film in particular, I kind of just did for the sake of making a film. And it was one that I had decided I was going to take these Post-it notes, because if you saw my desk right now, you'd be like, wow, you're like the Post-it note king. Basically, it is just covered, head to toe with Post-it notes. And they're all kind of to-do lists. And I realized early on I was just getting overwhelmed, right? Like I'm just like, oh, there's so many to-do lists. And I realized it was just sort of taking over my life. And I thought the best way to take revenge on these Post-it notes is to animate back on them and realize, hey, like I can actually reflect on the world that's going by me on Post-it notes through animation. And so it was kind of a meditative process for me to just pick up a pad of Post-it notes, a black pen, and just animate. And I did reflection on kind of like world events that I wasn't really they were existing around me, but I wasn't paying enough attention to, like 9/11 and the tsunamis out in East Asia at the time, and Columbine, and sort of these sort of events that obviously had small impacts on me in ways I didn't realize. And so it was kind of a sort of juxtaposition of my to-do list with these world events. And what ended up happening as I was animating, it took 9 months to do this film, I kind of kept telling myself, am I wasting 9 months of my life doing this little silly Post-it note animation, or could this become one of the biggest things I ever made? And luckily, the film premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York in 2007, and it blew up. Like, it became the biggest thing I ever made. And, YouTube saw it at Tribeca, and they bought it for their screening room back when they used to acquire films. And it kind of went viral. Like, it was one of those kind of things that just spread like wildfire, and I was just overwhelmed. I think in a weekend I had 100,000 views, and people were just like sending me emails like, oh my God, this film's changed my life. And it was kind of crazy because, I had like older ladies would email me like, I haven't picked up a paintbrush in 20 years, and I saw your film, and now I'm painting again, right? That was one of those kind of inspirational things. And kids would be like, they would send me Post-it note animations, they did on YouTube, and be like, hey, look what I did after I saw your movie. So it was one of those kind of great things where it just kind of kickstarted my career. I became known as the Post-it note guy, and but it was really kind of refreshing because, all of a sudden, I think the film's almost up to 2 million views now, but, it's one of those kind of things that just kind of kept going. And for me as a filmmaker, that short little 6-minute film became one of the most important films I had ever made in my life, and that kind of led me to wanting to do longer form content, and that's when I kind of got more into documentary work.
Very, very nice. As a matter of fact, and it's ironic you brought that up because I know that you initiated this Yellow Sticky Notes project, which of course deals with you doing these multi-day youth animation workshops, which is so exciting. I'm not familiar with the term. Is it Anijam? Am I pronouncing that right? Anijam animation?
Yeah, Anijam. Yeah,
okay.
I can kind of, so basically what happened after Yellow Sticky Notes, and so touching on that, animation is meditation. When I animate, I like to kind of go into a meditative state. I feel like, you're going deep inside yourself to create these drawings and find the motion and find the movement and the fluidity. So I kind of like the idea of animation is meditation. Someone had once said animation is concentration, but I took it to that meditative place because it just sounded better, felt better to me. So I kind of, because of the success of Yellow Sticky Notes, we got a bunch of really famous sort of Canadian animators together to do an Anijam, which is basically everyone's working on small segments of a bigger film, and they all kind of come together at the end and blend and become one larger film, but everyone does a small piece. So it's almost like, like getting a band together and jamming, but it's basically just animators coming together and creating a film. And so we took this concept and actually started using it in classrooms and teaching students animation through this sort of Anijam process, which is really great because it gives a great community building sense to the students who are all creating individual little pieces, but then become a larger collective of this film that they're creating together. And it's really great community building kind of exercise. And I basically have a degree in education as well, and that was something I kind of got early on after the animation. And it's one of those things where I like to teach. I think that's a very important skill to be able to pass on knowledge and skills to other people so they have the ability to go out and create their own content, and I think for kids especially, animation is a very powerful tool to help encourage just imagination and creativity. So early on, I just really wanted to make sure that we could give back in that way and inspire kids to just be creative. Yeah.
Yes, I enjoy teaching 150% too because I love it so much. I don't get a chance to do it as much as I'd like, but there's just something. That's what I want to ask you actually. Is there something that you take away from teaching, let's say for instance, children or whomever, versus being a director or producer of a film? Is it a different sort of high, so to speak? You know what I'm talking about? Because it's different being in a room with someone. So what do you get from that?
Yeah, of course. I think what's great about what I do is that every day is different. I always tell people I've found my bliss. Like to me, this is bliss. No day I wake up is ever work, right? And that's amazing. To me, it's like I've retired. You know what I mean? I'm doing my hobby every day of my life. What's great about that is that my day can involve teaching. My day can involve making films. My day can involve doing, presenting at film festivals or traveling. And so it's a great sort of career path, really. And teaching for me, and like I said, teaching, especially young kids, and just watching their eyes light up when they see that movement played back through their animation. Like they spend an hour drawing these little pictures that look almost identical to each other, each drawing, but then when played back, they're like, wow, it's moving. And you can see that magic happening, and their eyes light up, and it's just, that's a magical experience. I think for me, as someone who creates, same experience. When I create animation, I get to see it played back in an audience or with an audience. That's an amazing high. It's an amazing rush. And so I think everything comes with that level of excitement, right? And I think for me, that variety of every day of my life is different. Doing something fun and different and teaching. I balance it out. I don't always do workshops. I'd like to do a lot more, but for the most part, it's just a balancing act, right? I'm still making films. I'm still promoting films. I'm actually moving into kids' books. I'm doing a few children's books just because I want to try something a little different. You know what I mean? And but that's the joy of this is that it's just about creating. And I think whatever it is that you create, is what makes it special, you know. And I think for my skill set, I can make animations, I can make documentaries, I can make kids books. You know, I have that flexibility to do that, and it's great, you know. And then I think that's what brings that bliss, you know, to my life.
I agree, definitely, and I totally get that. What's nice is what you just touched on, which is I just recently started doing that in the last 7-8 years myself. Not all of us are blessed to be able to wake up and do things and get excited and love them and have such diversity and interesting things going on. You had mentioned, of course, obviously you were very educated, as a matter of fact. You have your BA from the University of British Columbia. You also have a Bachelor of Media Arts from the Emily Carr Institute. So because some of the folks that are listening in are more of I have two skills that listen to my show, some of which are very highly educated, done numbers and numbers of years of school, whereas some have just had more life experience. So as a man who has gotten very educated, very degreed, I might add, would you say to somebody who's walking into your field, whether it's animation or production or direction or writing, would you encourage them to kind of stock up on all that education before getting started, or a mixture of both, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, you know, I think everyone is an individual, and everyone obviously has different ways of approaching how they want to learn or figure things out. You know, some people are more hands-on; they just want to join a set. You know, get on set and just like, you know, basically PA for a while or start gripping. You know, and then work your way up the ladder. That's a way to do it as well. That life experience. You know, I think something like animation, it's a little trickier to learn on your own. Yes, you can do it. You can buy books. You can watch YouTube videos. You can watch, you know, tutorials. But it's always good to learn from someone else who can be a mentor, right? And luckily for myself, I've had quite a few of those mentors over my lifetime. And it's really helped me grow and shape as an artist. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. You know, I do believe highly that education is good. You know, if you can go that route and afford that route and devote that much time to it, great. But you know what? I always just encourage doing, right? You know, I think if you're someone who just wants to create films, watch films, and then pick up a camera and make films, you know, or similar ideas to that, right? You know, and just get that experience. It's really a combination of all those factors, you know, and then if you're really serious about it, find someone who can kind of mentor you and teach you the skills, you know, because everybody has, you know, these little tricks of the trade that you can learn from them, you know, and that's partly what's important about that interaction, right? You know, it's difficult to sit there and just sort of watch tutorials and read stuff out of books. You know, it's really nice to kind of interact with someone and have them critique your work, right? Critique is something that's very scary for people. You know, people don't want to be criticized, but in this industry that we're in, A, you're going to suffer a lot of rejection, and B, you're going to be critiqued. You know, it's a matter of, you know, a film critic watches your movie, you know, or the same thing with like any kind of art form. You know, there are always people who are going to want to discuss it and talk about it. You know, sometimes it's favorable, sometimes it's not, and that's kind of a very difficult thing to read a bad review. But you have to remember that all art is subjective. You know, not everyone is going to agree that this is a great movie or this was, you know, a bad movie. You know, sometimes you know, you see that sort of range. And I think as a filmmaker, as an artist, that's a difficult thing that I still struggle with, you know, dealing with that sort of form of critique. But I know it's very important for my development as an artist to continue growing and always be educating myself, you know, with different techniques and new forms and new sort of ideas, you know, and it's just constantly kind of creating those ideas to have something to move forward with. Yeah.
Oh, I agree, definitely. Well, and the other thing, too, is people look at, like, for instance, oftentimes life experience. Sometimes you have to kind of get in some of these situations. Like, I'm sure the first film you ever did, like Kip and Cow, for instance, that was your very first film. And now here you are, umpteen films later. Now, clearly, tell me one thing that you know for a fact that you did with the first movie that you know that you did not do with your last one. Because usually a filmmaker knows right off the bat. They're like, bam.
Yeah. Well, when you've had like a span of almost 20 years, you know, obviously things that you did back when you were young and, you know, had different ideas and different ways of approaching art making, you know, aren't kind of what you're going to do now. And I think even like a film I made in 2010, I would have done so many different things. But you have to kind of step back and realize that was you as an artist then, right? You know, you can't go back. There's no point of me going back and polishing something or redoing something because you want that art to stand alone as a period. Like I made a film called What Are You Anyways in 2005, and honestly it's hard for me to watch that film now because it is a reflection of myself at the age of 23. You know what I mean? Like, and there are a lot of decisions I made in that film that I would totally have done differently now, but that's not how I look and see life now, right? Like, I'm now
Sure.
a 37-year-old man, and, I'm not what I was like then. And so that's why I kind of realized that, even though, sure, it might be hard for me to kind of go back and revisit some of those things, you still have to be proud of what you create, and I think, and that growth as an artist is what comes from, knowing that you would have made some different decisions as you get more experienced. But I also think, too, you got to let things just be what they are, and something like Kip and Kyle is like a minute-long animation I just did, and that was really my first foray into filmmaking. And it's really just a little kind of crazy film that has no narrative. It's just a bunch of two kids playing in a sandbox. It really wasn't much more than that. But, I think that's what I mean. Film can be different things. There's experimental film, there is narrative film, there's animated film. There's so many different styles, and I think what's great about being independent is that you can, I always tell myself there's no rules. You got to kind of appeal to what people are going to probably want to watch, but at the same time, I'm not always going to stick to the rules, because it's fun to break them. You know what I mean? So it's one of those kind of things where you have to be the filmmaker, you have to be the artist you want to be, and at the end of the day, you need to be happy with what you're creating, or else what are you doing, right? And I think that's partly, my mantra, in that sense of just create what you feel like creating at the time you need to create. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Very, very nice. Now, I want to switch gears a second because I have to pick your brain for a moment. To those that are listening in that may not know this, you used to act as the serving former vice president to an international film festival. I want to try to pronounce this. It's Okanagan, is that right?
Oh, Okanagan. Yes, it's actually a First Nations word up here for. It means. I think it's the name of the actual tribe that actually used to live in the area. But yeah, the Okanagan Film Festival, actually, I don't think it's running anymore, which is sad. But I used to live in that small town I was telling you about early on in this conversation, Kelowna. And so they had a film festival. And being someone who's been to almost 300 film festivals, I decided, hey, maybe it would be nice to help facilitate this festival and kind of take it to the next step. So while I lived in Kelowna, it was fun. It was great because what's really fun about running a festival like that is that you get to watch films, and you get to watch good films, bad films, every kind of film, and you're curating. You're picking and programming which films are going to get in, and that could be like trying to pick the top 100 films out of 1,000 films, right? And so what you think is that, which I said again, film is subjective, but when you're looking at something like Sundance, which got like 15,000 submissions, you realize how difficult it is to actually get into a film festival because they may select 150 films out of 15,000 films. Like think about your odds, right? So I think when filmmakers come to me and they say, "Oh man, I didn't get into Sundance," I'm like, "Well, not surprising. What were your odds of getting into Sundance? Like 0.01%. You know what I mean?" So that's why it's sort of it's always an honor to get into any film festival. But at the same time, you can't really take rejection that seriously because it doesn't mean your film is bad. It just means that the programmer that day had a breakup with his girlfriend and your film was about breakups. You know what I mean? So it was just the wrong subject matter at the time when the programmer saw it, or it was just some reason why. It didn't mean that your film wasn't good. It just means that the programmer didn't like the film at that time, right? So the subject matter might not have worked for them. Or sometimes they're trying to program to specific sort of themes, right? So, if it's a horror festival, they're probably not going to take your film about, rabbits and goats. I don't know. But unless it's one of those, horror goat rabbit films. But I think I think that's the part of it, is that it's always good to kind of understand the inner workings of some of these things. You can actually appreciate how hard people work to put them on, and I think when we did the festival, I realized how much work it is to run a film festival, and when you go to film festivals now, I appreciate so much more of what they're trying to do, and I think you can see that in the U.S. now, there's probably 2,000 film festivals. I think every little small town has a film festival now. It's not that it's trendy, it's just that I think it's great that we're bringing independent film to these communities. But you have to realize, too, that, that's a lot of festivals. That's a lot of things going on. So as a filmmaker, trying to navigate that can often be tricky. So, yeah, I think, having that time. Actually, right now, we started a festival in Vancouver here called Hapapalooza. And for those of your listeners who don't know, Hapa is kind of a buzzword for people who are mixed. And so basically it's a celebration of mixed roots, arts, and identity. And, so Hapapalooza up here in Vancouver, we kind of celebrate the arts, but from an aspect of people who are identified as being mixed. And how does that sort of identity influence your art? And so we focus on a lot of things like, writing and film and dance and music, etc. So, I still have a foot in the door of running festivals just because, it sounds like I do everything. It's like I'm teaching and making festivals. But I am, you know what I mean? But I think at the same time I'm busy, but it's a good busy, and it's a fun busy. I get to do a lot of really fun things, So yeah, that's it really.
Well, and the reason that I brought that up is because this is my first year. Actually, my film festival is this year for the very first time, so I'm doing this for the first time. So whenever I talk to filmmakers, I am. My festival actually was supposed to be this month, and now it's been moved to September, and we won't even get into why. But so we've had to change the date. So I'm doing my first film festival in New York City. And so every time I interview directors or filmmakers, I'm always asking them any tips for me or something that I could do for filmmakers. I mean, I'm giving monetary awards on top of other awards this year. For me, it really becomes a matter of, like when you were talking about the filmmaker, like I'm the primary person who watched the films, but I also subbed them out to 2 or 3 other judges that didn't know the directors. For me, it's a very big deal that integrity is kept, meaning that I can judge any of my friends and say, sure, I love your film because you're my friend, but that doesn't mean anything. In my opinion, to me, that wouldn't matter. I mean, I think you really have to be honest and fair. And so I've just been asking people, hey, any recommendations, any good advice, anything you can tell me. It is a lot of work, and filmmakers, 95% of you are wonderful. 95.
Yes,
and then there's that 5 of you that are like egomaniacs.
Yeah. Well, and this is the one thing that I learned early on is that ego is the destroyer of all mankind. It's just the way it goes. I think, this industry is one that can kind of create these egos. Obviously, you see the actor, you see the celebrities and such, right? You see these directors, which is fine, but just realize that unless you're Steven Spielberg, let's keep it down a notch, and I think this is where it kind of comes into play. I think early on I kind of, it's great to sort of see your films do great, you're getting the success, you're getting the swelled head, everything's fun, but at the same time, we have to be nice to each other, you know what I mean? And I think I'm Canadian, we're very nice to everybody. We say sorry and we're very polite. And every time, and that's what I said early on, is that when I started to run that festival, I realized how much work this was. And so, I've been to almost 300 film festivals, and, every time I'm going to Dallas, actually, this weekend for a festival, I'll be in Portland the week after for another festival, and I'll be in New York for the next festival. So there's like 3 festivals in a row in the span of 3 weeks. But you need to realize that, coordinating with people, they're really busy. They're juggling, 20 to 100 to 200 films sometimes. And, you can't be there going, okay, well, I need an entourage to be picked up by a limo, blah, blah, blah. They just don't have the resources. They don't have that. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? And the faster you, as a filmmaker, you can understand that, yes, it's nice when they can comp you a hotel, or it's nice when they can fly you in, or they can do something for you. That's always great, very appreciative. But sometimes festivals can't afford that. They just don't have the infrastructure to do that. That's fine. You have to understand that, too. So it's all just keeping expectations at bay, realizing that, a lot of festivals are kind of run by one person out of their second bedroom in their house because there isn't money for an office, right? They're doing this out of the sheer passion that they want to share films. And I think we just need to keep reminding ourselves that it really is this collective experience of watching films together that's so important.
Right.
I think anytime we can continue to watch films in a theater with an audience and hear the Q&A of the filmmaker there explaining the process of making the film is a very special thing. So, I think that's really what festivals are kind of for now, right? Like festivals used to be about like, oh, hey, let's do Sundance, get distribution, and make a ton of money.
Right.
When you have 2,000 festivals in the U.S. now, well, it's very easy to kind of say, okay, well, what is the benefit of a festival? Well, to me, the benefit of a festival is that you are having a screening with the community that you're screening in, with passionate people who care about film, and I think those are the ones who attend film festivals. And, it's no easy job, obviously. A lot of times everyone's volunteer, it's very grassroots level. And so it's just really important to kind of remind people, like, hey, we're not big, we're growing, but, we're still grassroots. We're all volunteer. We're doing our best. And I think it's just a good reminder to some people who might have inflated egos to understand, yes, this isn't Sundance. This isn't, Tribeca or Cannes. This is not Toronto. This is a little community festival, or whatever, right? So it's good to keep your expectations at bay. But I think as someone who is trying to organize a film festival, it's important that, it's always great to have the community filmmakers, if we can get them in. I've done things where I've homestayed, with families, you know what I mean, just because that's what the festival provided, and I really like that. You get to meet the community, you get to meet the people in the community. So it's really just kind of a matter of, like, building that community. And, for a lot of filmmakers, it's just a matter of kind of, having good communication and understanding, what needs to happen. And if they want to come promote the movie in person, that there might be some steps taken that they can help, either get a hotel discount or something, and so there's so many different, facets and so many different festival sort of styles and sizes, like something like Tribeca. I went to that festival in 2007 with Yellow Sticky Notes, and it's just huge. Like you're standing in a room and Robert De Niro's standing right next to you, and you're like, oh wow, okay, well, what do I say to Robert De Niro? And then you go to like a little, community festival in like, some small town, and it feels great because it's just a community of filmmakers there, and everyone's just getting along, and there's this great hometown spirit. So I really appreciate those community sort of festivals just as much as I appreciate the big ones.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's good. That's great. Thank you. That made me feel so much better. Yeah, because my filmmakers have been wonderful, but you come across one or two, and then they just kind of hit you, and then it's like, yeah, why am I doing this again? But you've hit the point home, which is obviously every one of you needs every one of us to showcase your films. Otherwise, if we don't work together, nobody gets to see great art. That's really the long story short, obviously. Now, before we get into some of the other things as it relates to Mix Match, I know, obviously, of course, that you run the Meditating Bunny Studio for 16 years now, actually. And just so you folks know, this is an animation studio which produces and creates not just animated works, but also experimental as well as documentaries, clearly. I'm curious, I mean, obviously I could figure it out for myself, Meditating Bunny, which is so cool. And you started that so long ago. Now, when working in the studio itself, is your time devoted, would you say, fairly and equally amongst animation as well as film, as well as writing, as well as everything? Do you try to piecemeal everything out to where you're getting to a little bit of everything regularly, or would you say that your time is leaning towards one versus the other?
Yeah, I think in the industry we're in, it's very much about juggling. Sometimes I have to wear a producer hat, sometimes I wear the director hat, sometimes I wear the animator hat, sometimes I wear the secretary hat. You know what I mean? Like, that's just, it's the way it kind of goes when you're dealing with small boutique kind of things. We worked with clients like 3M, Sharpie, a lot of big ad agencies as well, and so sometimes, that's some high-level stuff, when you're dealing with really big corporate clients, and we're creating animations for them and videos for them, on top of trying to create independent work as well, our passion projects. And our passion projects are really what is important for the studio, but obviously to keep a studio going and floating, you need to take on the commercial work, right? So a lot of the day is spent kind of juggling a lot of those asks, when we're dealing with a big client that needs their film and their little video done, like, next week, then obviously more time is devoted to making sure that's going to get done. Because, we in this sort of industry, you can't burn clients because they're so important to us, right? So we want to make sure that everyone is getting what they need when they need to have it done. Something like Mixed Match, that film took us 6 years because really we were juggling a lot of things in between that, you know what I mean? So it was one of those kind of things that just stretched over time. And a lot of times documentaries do that. They're going to stretch over 4 or 5 years. People don't realize when they say, I'm going to go make a documentary and I think it'll be done next year. No. So I know documentarians are still working 10 years later on their films. So I think it's just managing those expectations of saying, okay, well, yeah, we've got commercial work to deal with, we've got passion projects to deal with, I have personal time to deal with, I've got a 1.5-year-old at home now, and so there's a lot of things to consider. My days are long, it might be 12, 14 hours sometimes where I'm working, but like I said, it doesn't feel like work, because it's fun stuff. I get to kind of I get to travel. I get to do radio interviews. I get to, always kind of juggle my time. And I think that's what's really kind of, that's the reward. Even though, sometimes it feels like, geez, I'm just so busy. I'm so busy. But you know what? Sometimes it's nice to kind of just know you've always got stuff to do. I think that's when people kind of start shutting down, is when they just sort of get bored and tired and they just want to sit and watch TV all day. I think that's.
I agree.
There's a serious kind of need there to find something that you can be passionate about, So I'm just lucky that I've turned that passion into a career. Yeah.
No, I agree, definitely. Well, and the other question is, to those that might be listening in, whether they have a project relative to animation or anything else in your realm, talk a little bit about accessibility, meaning how accessible are you guys to take on new projects? What are the things that you feel that you're top of the shelf for? Obviously, we want to say that Jeff's top shelf and everything, but I think we all know that your specialty items lie maybe in doing more so of this or this. And just let people know how difficult or how easy, hopefully, it will be to get some of your services or to work with you.
Yeah, we get people reach out to us all the time, and I think it really depends on the capacity of the job and what they're expecting and what they're looking for. Everyone comes to us with an idea, that's like, oh, I like this whiteboard animation I saw on YouTube, and we saw that your studio does whiteboard animation. Well, we specialize at our studio at doing old school animation techniques, which are really things that are traditional, so hand drawn, stop motion, also known as claymation, that kind of stuff. So we like things that aren't so digital per se. We still do digital things, but we stay away from computer animation, so stuff that Pixar and Disney does. We just don't do that. There's a lot of people doing that. So we found a niche kind of doing animation and stuff that's a little kind of old school. It has that great kind of charm, that classic kind of look. And, so a lot of our clients come to us sort of with preconceived notions that we like this style of video. Can you do something like that for us? And then really it's just a conversation about budget, because obviously everything takes time, everything costs money, and it's sort of one of those things where I have a triangle model and it's good, fast, cheap, so you draw a triangle, and each corner you have good, fast, cheap. You can have two, but you can't have the other. So you start thinking about that. Okay, well, I want something good and fast. Well, sorry, that's not going to be cheap, right? I want something that's good and cheap. Well, that's not going to be fast. It's going to take us some time. But I have a rule. I don't work fast and cheap because it's not going to be good, and I don't work that way. I don't want to create something that's not good, because obviously that's going to tarnish my reputation as a filmmaker, as an animator, as a studio producer. And so we just always want to make sure that we're creating great content for people, but it's either going to cost you money or you have to give us time. There has to be a little bit of a trade-off there. If someone comes to us and says, hey, we need this in like 4 weeks, well, you have to remember animation takes time, because we're drawing over and over again, countless drawings, or there's things that are done under the camera with hundreds of thousands of pictures, so nothing can happen quickly. And if it wants to happen quickly, well, then I need to hire more people, which is going to cost more money. So it's just really that balance, right? I think when people come to me and say, oh, well, I want this whiteboard video next week and I've got $500, well, I'm sorry, we'll find you someone else. You know what I mean? There's certain sort of, we have to have those expectations that we definitely have to value our time. Like any artist, I think there's always this sort of difficulty with artists, because people feel like, oh, you're creating something that you like doing, so I should be able to just pay you nothing because you like to do it. But you have to remember, we all still have mortgages, we still have to eat, we still have to provide for our families, and so,
of course.
You're making $100 an hour at your job doing, law or whatever you're doing. Well, we need to be compensated equally as well, too, so that we can also, live. So that's always, the tricky part, because I get a lot of people that sort of think that, this stuff shouldn't cost that much money. But you know what? We're creating media, and there's a lot of wheels in this cog, the system. We have to provide music and sound design and the animation and the post-production and the pre-production, the storyboards. There's so many elements that are involved with this kind of stuff that people don't realize, and all you kind of have to do is sort of go online and sort of watch, there's that Studio Lakai, they did Paranorman, and I think they did Kubo and the Four Strings. Like, watch their animation process. It'll make your head explode, because they're basically doing stop motion with these little puppets, and it's so intricate, It's so detailed. But, we're talking like hundreds of hours for like a couple seconds of animation. Like, that blows my mind, and you just have to keep that in mind, that, this is it's an art form, and it's animation is one of the most misunderstood art forms to ever exist. And it really has a lot to do with the fact that, in each second of animation, you have 24 drawings. That's how many drawings it takes to make something move. So when you think of 24 drawings as a second, times that by how many minutes you need, and that's how much work someone's going to be doing to draw stuff. So, if someone says, oh, hey, I want this battle scene with like 10,000, army people, no. It's just, who's drawing that? It's impossible. So yeah, I think it's really, I go back to the whole managing your expectations, and that's what we do with clients. We sit down and we work with them to make sure that everyone's happy with the product they're going to get at the end. Yeah.
Nice, very nice. So that brings us obviously to Mix Match, of course, and you already touched on one of the things I was going to mention, which is it's 6 years of creation in the making, and folks, just so you know, it's not uncommon, obviously, for many filmmakers, for whatever reason, whether it's budget constraints, whether it's, casting, scheduling, whatever have you, it's not out of the norm to take a significant amount of time to make this. And what's significant, I think, about your film is it touches on more than one of very many inspiring and powerful messages. Obviously, you're talking about crossing multiple ethnicities, talking about different genres, different individuals from different cultures who happen to be put in situations like in this particular instance with getting the blood cancer diagnosis. You're trying to find genetic matches for bone marrow and stem cell transplants. So let's start off talking about generic stuff before we get to the film itself, which is this. It's been brought about that in terms of the registry itself, meaning nationwide when it comes to being on this registry, we have a significantly large amount of individuals who are mainly Caucasian in nature. So if you would, talk a little bit about why that is so significant, or should I say why it's so pertinent to individuals who are multicultural when it comes to finding a match.
Yeah, I think this is a topic I didn't know a lot about either. As someone who's mixed, I thought I knew everything about mixed race people, but obviously I didn't. It was one of those kind of things where it was brought up to me because someone said, oh, hey, I know someone in Vancouver, they're mixed Asian, they have leukemia, and they're looking for a match, and you could be their match. And I said, well, that's weird. Why? What's going on here? And what it really boiled down to was that there's just a sort of a less representation of mixed people on the registry. And how it works is, yes, you're right, we're trying to find a genetic twin for someone, because if someone within their family isn't a match, they have to look outside their family to find an unrelated donor. And that donor usually comes from someone who has the same ancestry as you, and so when you're mixed, you need to kind of find someone who's got that same ancestry. So that's kind of a combination of a few different things. So let's say if you're really mixed up, it's going to be very hard to find someone who's kind of similar to you in that way to be a match, especially a perfect match, because you want a perfect match. When we say perfect, we mean like they're your twin. Like they basically, your mom could have had you and this other person. You know what I mean? Like that's how close you are genetically. So what it turned out for me is I never signed up. I didn't know what it was about. I don't want to say I didn't care. I just didn't really know enough to really get myself to sign up, and it wasn't really that easy to do, for me anyways, to figure it out. And that's really kind of a common thing. So it was a few years later, I was approached by this woman, ethnicities, who actually runs an organization called Mixed Marrow. And she kind of was like, oh, hey, I know you make films about the multiracial experience. Do you know about this topic? And then I kind of was like, yeah, sort of. I've read up about this stuff before. I've kind of been asked to do it, and the more I started to read about it, the more I realized, yeah, this is a problem. It was a very big problem for a lot of mixed people to find matches. Not just mixed people, but people who maybe come from different minority groups, right? So if you're Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Black, Blacks actually have a very low percentage of trying to find a match too. I think they're at 64% of the time they'll find a match. It may not be a perfect match, but that's almost 40% where they're not going to find a match. And a lot of that has a lot to do with that admixture, because of over the years, African Americans have also sort of blended and mixed. Chances are you're not going to find a match from Africa because of the sort of quote-unquote purity that exists in Africa, right? Someone from a tribe in Africa, if they got leukemia, would find someone else within their tribe to be a match because they haven't migrated in that same way. So it seemed all very complex to me, right? And I think even to your listeners, you're like, holy cow, like this could make your head spin.
Right.
So
I know.
That's partly why it took so long to really figure this stuff out, is because we wanted to make sure it was accessible and digestible, right? We wanted to make sure that it was appealing to people as a topic, to want to learn more, because essentially, why should you care, right? If you're not mixed race, why should you care? Well, it really stems to the fact that we're all pretty mixed in our own way, right? Like, I'm pretty sure when you do those Ancestry.coms and you do those, like, 23andMe's and you get your test results back and you're like, oh, wow, hey, look at that, I'm 14% this, you know what I mean? And I had no idea. And that's what's kind of intriguing about all this, is that I think we all have that ability to be able to save a life. And that ability is heightened by the fact that, we come from different places. We have different backgrounds. And I think that's kind of exciting, that you have the ability to actually be a cure for someone, who is in need of a cure. And a lot of times now, giving bone marrow isn't about, like, the needle in the hip, right? Like, that's only done maybe 20% of the time. Now it's really just as easy as a blood transfusion, or, like, basically just giving blood. I think it's basically a 2-hour process where you sit in a chair and they take your blood, they take out the white blood cells, and they put them back in your body. The rest go back in your body, and the white blood cells are what are used with the stem cells to help regenerate someone else's bone marrow in their body. So it's crazy because unless you know someone who's been affected by leukemia or cancers and stuff, you don't know any of this stuff. And even the people who actually have don't even know half of this stuff. And it's sort of a crash course for them when they're trying to learn all this stuff while they're sick, and that's really brutal sometimes. So we wanted to really focus on the patients in the film, and, we wanted to tell their stories. Yes, they're having a hard time finding matches, but it's not hopeless. Right, and luckily we do have patients we followed in the film that found matches. You know what I mean? And what was great is that they just sort of they came to them over the 6 years of making the film. So that's great. You know what I mean? Like, that's why we gave the film time to work, because we couldn't just film it in a year. We had to give our patients time to figure out their stories. And, it was probably one of the most challenging films I've ever had to make in my entire life, because it's not easy, when you're dealing with people who are sick, traveling the country, going to hospitals, filming in hospitals. It was rather grueling, and unfortunately we did have some patients that, unfortunately passed away. And that gets difficult, because as a filmmaker, as a documentarian, you want to get close to your subjects, because you want to be able for them to trust you, and you want them to give you access to their lives. And that accessibility into a patient's life and their subject's life is so important for us to tell their story. So when things like that happen, it's pretty difficult, to deal with. And so a lot of times I just have to step back a bit and sort of regroup, and then you kind of move forward. But you know what? We got it done, and now it's doing really well. So, yeah.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I wanted to ask you about, to those that have not seen any portion of the film, because I was blessed enough to be able to be sent this information, and not everyone's been able to see it or check it out or even view it. Talk to your audience a little bit about what made you pick the particular individuals that you cast in the movie, meaning they're telling their particular stories. Were they brought to you? Did you find them? Did you scout them out, et cetera? And what do you think they're, just basically to those that haven't seen it, what makes their stories stand out, or what would be intriguing for the average audience goer to say, hey, I really want to see this and I want to get invested in these people?
Yeah, and that was really important for us, is that when Athena approached me with the idea for making a documentary on this topic, she's the woman I was telling you about who runs Mixed Marrow.
Right.
She had already kind of worked with a lot of patients through her organization to basically raise awareness for them and to try and spread their stories so that people would be more engaged to sign up. So she had actually done a lot of that footwork for us already, because she had gained the trust of people we were going to work with, and she had gathered those stories. And so luckily we kind of just sort of piggybacked on what she had already done, which made things really great because they trusted her. They had worked with Athena, they loved Athena, and so we could kind of work with them and film with them. And actually, as the film progressed, we met more patients who reached out to Athena, or just people that we sort of encountered along the way. And what was really kind of nice about that is that because Athena had built up such a sort of repertoire with sort of these sort of patients, that people just trusted her. And I think that was really important. So we actually filmed almost 200 hours of footage with, way over 10 subjects, and we probably could only fit about 5 or 6 into the film. So some people, unfortunately, weren't able to make it into the film. But a lot of those secondary stories we still cut together into little vignettes that we put on the website. So, if audiences want to check out a little bit more about the film or a little bit more of the other stories that we captured, they can just go to our website, which is mixedmatchproject.com. And basically they can kind of watch some of those stories and that we captured that didn't make it into the film, but obviously are very important to tell. So yeah, it's in selecting the stories we did for the film, it was really that we wanted a nice range of topics. So it's like following a subject who donates bone marrow was very important, as well as people who are searching, and sadly we had to sort of talk about a story where, we had a subject that didn't make it, and so, we wanted to make sure we had a really well-rounded, story.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I understand. And to those that are listening in that may not pertinent things to talk about here. First of all, let's say somebody like me is listening to you today and they say, you know what, I'm totally listening to this and I'm totally on board with Jeff and what he's trying to do, not only by exposing through the film, but also there are people out there that can actually go today or tomorrow or next week to actually register. And apparently it's as simplistic as having a cheek swab done. Is that correct?
Yeah, super easy. Back in the day, it used to be they would have to take a sample of blood, which scares people.
Right.
Nobody wants needles,
Sure.
But, through technology and the fact that, every day we're advancing in medical technology, it's as easy as just basically swabbing the side of your cheek with a little cotton swab to collect some cells, and they take that in for testing, and they can actually type your DNA from that, and you go into a database, and basically it's a numbered sequence. It's called HLA, human leukocyte antigens. Don't make me spell that. And basically, what they do is they just store that information. So when somebody's looking for a match, it's basically just pull these codes up, and if your code matches someone else's code, you're like, boom, okay, well you could be a match for that person. So it's really simple. And I hate saying simple because nothing's ever simple. Coding your DNA is not simple. But in terms of signing up to the registry, it's really just a form and a cheek swab. It takes 10 minutes to do, and you're done, And so we've felt it very important. This is why we like public screenings. This is why we like festival screenings and community screenings and educational screenings in public, because we've been able to have bone marrow drives at every single one of our screenings, and so after an audience is done watching the movie, they can come out and actually sign up to the registry. You don't have to, we're not forcing you, but I think people feel really compelled after seeing these stories to want to help. And that call to action has been very important to us because, people are like, I want to help. How can I help? And we actually provide that resource right there for you after the film is done to say, hey, if you want to help, join the registry. That's the first step. Now, not everyone can join the registry. They have age limitations, and it really has to do with the fact that, older people's stem cells get old, and they're maybe not as good to transplant anymore. So a lot of times the age range is in between, let's say, 17 to 45, or in Canada, I think it's 17 to 39. I think in the U.S. it's a little higher, so it's 18 to in your 40s. So because of that, certain age ranges can join. But for those that are outside of those age ranges, we just encourage them to help spread the word, to volunteer. And the other way that's kind of really great is that you can donate cord blood now, umbilical cord blood. So if your baby, which is basically medical waste, is born, they take the cord and they can extract the blood from that cord and actually bank that. And so that cord blood, which is just going to be thrown in the garbage anyways, can actually be used as like life-saving material for somebody who needs a transplant. And they're doing great things with that now, with double cord transplants or like just expanded blood. They can actually take a little amount of blood and actually expand the white blood cells in it so that they can transplant that for adults. They never used to be able to do that, but that's only in the last couple of years where they're still doing clinical trials, but it's a thing, and so it's amazing how rapidly technology is advancing, which is great. But in this film we focus on the human stories, but also just letting people know that there are ways you can help. And my wife and I donated our child's umbilical cord blood when she was born a year and a half ago, and that made it into the movie. So I hate giving away parts of the movie, but I think it's important to share that because this kind of thing inspired me. And I was a skeptic. I'm someone who's like, okay, I don't know, this stuff's all foreign to me. I don't really get it. But you know what? Seeing and meeting the people and understanding the passion and the need and the hope that they're striving for really makes you want to go out and save lives. And so we always said if we could save one life with this film, our entire 6-year journey has been worth it. And we actually found out in Seattle, somebody that we signed up at our screening in Seattle actually got called in to donate. So you know what?
Really?
That's crazy. Like that means it's working. What we're doing is working.
Exactly.
We're saving lives with the film, and if you can save a life with a film, that's pretty powerful stuff. Yeah.
I agree, 150%. Now, before I forget to mention this, too, I correct me if I'm mistaken, you have a showing on the 16th at 12 o'clock in Dallas, Texas, correct, at the Angelica Theater?
Yeah, I think it's actually on the 12 p.m. at the Angelica Theater.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Film
July
Center
16th
in
Dallas.
I'm going to be there for the Q&A. We'll have a bone marrow
Yep.
drive after that. We have a screening in Portland at 7 o'clock on the 19th of July at the Northwest Film Center. Information, this is all could be on the website, which is mixedmatchproject.com. You can go there. And then we have a big screening in New York, actually, on the 29th of July at the East Village Cinema as part of the Asian American International Film Festival.
Oh, yeah.
The East Village Cinema. And that's always huge. That's at 4 o'clock. And so it's always huge to have these screenings, especially in New York. That's great. That'll be our first screening in New York. And then actually we're screening in Minneapolis on the 4th as well, too, at the very first Midwest Mixed Conference. So this is what's great. Yeah, like we've got tons of screenings lined up, and there's more and more each week. And we always just encourage people to check out our social media and our website just to kind of keep updated on what we're doing, because every day there's more screenings. And the best thing for independent film is that we have a devoted fan base that just helps us promote, and helps us share these screenings and comes out and just helps us out. So, with Facebook, it's just Mixed Match, and Twitter and Instagram is Mixed Match Movie. That's our handle, or what do you call that thing? Little @ sign, at Mixed Match Movie.
I was just going to say, I'm going to read through all of those, and then everybody will be able to find you. And before I forget,
that's what it is. Yeah.
If there is somebody listening in today that happens to be somebody who works here, or does this, or does that, meaning that if they have a desire, I assume you are like many filmmakers, which means if somebody's interested and has a location in a specified state and they want to do a screening of their film, are they able to do that?
Yeah, we've actually partnered with a group called Tugg.com, and it's TUGG.com. And what's great about this is it's called Cinema on Demand. And so anybody in the U.S., if they want to arrange a screening, can go on Tugg.com, TUGG.com, find Mixed Match, and then basically follow the steps. There's no risk. Basically, Tugg will tell you where the theaters are that you can book, and then basically all the job is of the person booking is that they just get their friends, enough people to trigger enough tickets to actually book the theater. So there's no money up front, and I think it's kind of a new, interesting model. I haven't tried this yet while we're on Tugg, but we're just starting this. So it's something kind of new to me too, but I kind of like the idea that anybody has the ability to organize a screening. So like if there's a place in the U.S. that hasn't had a screening yet that you really want to bring the film to and share this experience with people, then you have that ability to do that. And actually it's so simple that you just go on there, you say, I'm interested in doing a screening here, and then they find the venue for you, and all your job is to promote it, and make sure that we can trigger enough tickets to make it worthwhile to book the theater. And then once that happens, people just show up and you show the movie and you can talk about it afterwards if you want to too, and then you've had a screening. And you can even set up a bone marrow drive, I think, too, if you can get a hold of us, and we can help facilitate that as well, too. So it's a really great kind of way to promote that call to action and actually just get the film out there. So we will be doing a general release at some point in the near future, probably early 2018. We will do like an iTunes and sort of get it out on all those platforms that people can find accessible. But for right now, we really just want to focus on community screenings because that's where the power is. We have the ability for people to come together, watch a movie, feel inspired, and join the registry, and do that. So I think that's really our mandate and our goal right now. And I'm sure at some point it'll be in indefinite wide release, and people in all parts of the world will be able to see it. Yes.
I would love that. That would be awesome. Okay, let me go through this montage of places that you can find Jeff here. As he mentioned, of course, the main website for the movie itself is www.mixedmatchproject.com. His company, www.mediatingbunny.com. He can be found on YouTube, Vimeo. He has an IMDb profile as well as a Wikipedia profile, a LinkedIn profile. Also, another site you may want to check out, which I don't believe we talked about, the www.onebighapa, that's HAPA family.com. Twitter handle is @MixedMatchMovie, as well as Instagram. There's two different places, @MediatingBunny, as well as at Mixed Match Movie. So you can find them on Instagram as well.
It's sorry, Cindy, it's Meditating Bunny.
Okay. Meditating,
Everybody
thank
says
you.
Mediating
You
Bunny,
can tell
but
it's been a long day here. Woo!
Yeah.
And then on Facebook,
just stretching, sorry.
That's okay. You have the Mixed Match. Obviously, the page is Mixed Match there as well. And then I thought I saw an actual personal Facebook page for you, but am I mistaken? I wasn't quite sure if that was you or if it was an outdated page. Okay.
No, it's Jeff Chiba Stearns at Facebook, too. I think it's just Chiba Stearns, actually. Chiba Stearns. That's sort of a public page. People can just sort of follow me there.
Gotcha.
But I would recommend that just because, it's. I think after Yellow Sticky Notes kind of blew up, I had a lot of people I didn't know wanting to be my friends, which is never a bad thing. I'm not going to say, but it's sometimes overwhelming. So I created a fan page, I guess, for that. So people can follow me there if they want to kind of keep updated on screenings and just what we're doing. So, yeah.
Cool. That sounds absolutely wonderful. Well, definitely. I will try to make it a point. I don't know if I'll be in New York City in July, obviously, of course, but I would like to try to. I'm going to hop on one of your sites to see if I can't do a screening in Wisconsin because I don't know that I can do my same film festival in Wisconsin, but I would love to screen your film here.
There is a screening in Madison, Wisconsin. Check this out.
Get out.
In Madison, Wisconsin, we're going to screen on October the 15th at the Madison's Asian American Documentary Spotlight. And
nice.
I don't have a ton more, but I think the screening's at 7 p.m. If people are interested, I would just check out Madison's Asian American Documentary Spotlight, or at least bookmark that. It's going to be on the 15th of October. I will be there in person.
You will?
It's already booked,
okay, you know what? Well, then let's make a date.
I'm going to be there. Where are you?
Yeah, I'll definitely come up then. That would be awesome because my kids are not going to be gone. My kids won't be home that day, so I can come to the screening because usually if I try to bring them, they're going to be like, this is so boring because they're 10 and 12. So they're probably not going to be into the whole bone marrow thing. I'm just going to say.
Kids.
But I would love
There's
to.
animation
that would
in
be
it,
awesome.
but the animation's more just to kind of help explain the concepts. The kids are like, okay, wait a second, where's the animation? It's half animation, half live action. But I definitely would say 10 and 12 is maybe a little too young for this. But,
I was just going to say, and when we get off there, I'll send you a note on that because in this way, then I can develop a page because I have friends in Madison, and so this way I can invite people and I'll bring them with me. It'd be awesome. And I'm so glad we got to do this. I'm so sorry it took me a while to get back to you. It's just been nuts. My show has taken off, so it's been crazy and insane. The schedule's been nuts, and we're getting a comic book out. We're releasing all sorts of other things, too. So I'm so glad that I got a chance to introduce my audience to your audience and the things that you've done. I have to say I'm impressed. I'm so excited just to come and shake your hand. You are a multi-talent. You're just absolutely a lovely human being, and I cannot wait. And I'll be sure to spread the word on the screenings, make sure that I post it up on social media. And about 2 hours after the show, I'll send you a link because then this interview will be archived so your listeners and fans can tune in. And certainly feel free to come back anytime. You get another project to promote, you got another movie, you got another something or other. Please feel free to come back. I would love to have you anytime.
Super. Well, thanks, Cindy. I really enjoyed this.
Not a problem at all. You have a wonderful Jeff, I'll talk to you soon. I'll send you a note after we get done, and then we'll kind of figure out what we're doing next. You have a great day, dear.
All right.
Thank you.
Hope to meet you soon. Okay. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye. Tell me that he wasn't like fabulous and smart. I love fabulous, smart, creative chameleons. I say this like 85 times a day. Creative chameleon. Can't say it enough. And again, folks, just so you know, his name is Jeff. And, of course, Chiba, as he said, and that's spelled C-H-I-B-A, and Stearns, S-T-E-A-R-N-S. One more time, the websites are, the movie we were referring to is called Mixed Match, and it's www.mixedmatchproject.com, mixedmatchproject.com. I'm going too fast today. The company is called www, and it's meditatingbunny.com, and meditating being MEDITATING bunny.com. His other project, www.onebig, and that's HAPA, HAPA family.com. He can be found on YouTube, Vimeo, IMDb, LinkedIn, and Wikipedia. The Twitter handle is @MixedMatchMovie. The Instagram is meditating. I don't know where meditating's come from. Meditating Bunny, and also Mixed Match Movie, and that's both on Instagram. And then over on Facebook, as he mentioned, it's Jeff Chiba, C-H-I-B-A, Stearns, S-T-E-A-R-N-S, and Mixed Match. And, of course, that's where you can go ahead and check out. Please, we encourage anybody and everybody to at least, even if you're not necessarily comfortable with being a donor, just go check it out. Stop at your local hospital, clinic, center. Just talk to them and say, hey, I have a minute interest in learning what it takes to become, a stem cell transplant person or a bone marrow transplant. Ask them. As we said, it's just a very simple cheek swab to start. It's become much more simplistic. Those of you who are pregnant at the moment, obviously, we talked about the importance of the umbilical cord blood after birth in terms of being able to save lives. My big thanks to Jeff Stearns. I cannot wait to meet you in October in Madison. I'm so excited. As you know, I always get so excited when I get to meet my not only fans and followers, but people that come to the show, because I don't always get a chance to meet them face-to-face. So this is super, super exciting. And to those of you that are in Texas on the 16th, as we mentioned, all the information will be on my show page, but the screening is at 12 o'clock, July 16th. Tomorrow, don't forget Jennifer Rowe's success story from obesity amongst depression and gestational diabetes to being not only fit and trim and healthy, but also inspirational to many of us. So that'll be at 12 o'clock Central Standard Time tomorrow. I look forward to talking to you guys then. I'm off and got to do some more writing, and then I'm going to be out and about for the evening. Kerwin's got a second playoff game tonight, so everybody cross their fingers we don't get a rain out, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.
Napa know-how.
A Napa guy knows more isn't always better, unless we're talking about full-size vans. These beasts do more than get you from A to B. They have so much space a man can live in it. With shag carpeting, waterbed, and a sweet lava lamp, these mobile abodes have all the comforts of home. With quality parts and plenty of Napa know-how, you can keep the original tiny house running longer, stronger. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.